Hi everybody, Dr. Samantha Luther here, chiropractor in Lincoln, Nebraska, and today we're going to be talking about on this webinar, teen anxiety and depression. And now you're probably wondering, what in the world does a chiropractor know about this? Obviously, I'm not claiming to be a mental health therapist. They are rock stars in themselves, but just going to be talking about, and this can be a difficult topic to address and something that maybe teens don't want to come out and like talk about with their parents. But as a chiropractor and as a professional that does see a lot of teens, it's one of those things that we can kind of pick up on, even kind of, as we go through their health history and whatnot, that this is something that we might start to address with mom and dad, that kind of just brings them to the surface, brings them light to the situation that might be going on with their kiddo. But I want to present this webinar so maybe like as parents are watching this, they can kind of see like, yeah, that's something that my kid might be going through, they might be struggling with, and maybe I didn't quite pick up on that, because we want this to be a positive rippling effect for them by shedding light on the situation and not allowing it to become a negative rippling effect in which, horrible things can go ahead and happen, because we all know the increased situation that I think our country has with mental health right now. It needs to be, like I said, this issue needs to be addressed. We need to shed some light on this, and we need to talk about it and bring it to the surface so it's not something that we push under the rug and it becomes so much of an issue later on for our kids. And that's the last thing that we need to do. They're teens, they deserve to flourish, they deserve to have those awesome teenage years, and so then they can also become the adults that they want to be as well. So like I say, gonna start talking about this stuff, teen anxiety and depression. So talking about anxiety, and like if you see me shifting off, I have my notes right behind there, and I also just want to make sure that my notes are completely accurate and just bringing those good definitions to you guys. So anxiety is just a general term that is used to discuss anything that causes an irrational sense of fear, nervousness, apprehension, and worry. We are all going to face those things on a day-to-day basis, but like I say, the word irrational is kind of what got thrown in there, or an overwhelming amount. Anxiety can be a normal, absolute normal part of life, but it's how we are maybe able to adapt back to normalcy within that, how we're able to not let it get out of hand and spiral out of control. And so, like I say, anxious thoughts, anxious feelings, they can be normal, but if they become too much and start to really bulldoze and like snowball, that's when we start to see, maybe anxiety disorders come into play. Like I say, anxiety is almost like a safety mechanism. It's our fight or flight. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't prevent or like get out of, bad situations like we should. We honestly have that kind of like gut instinct, or that, release of like that fight or flight response within our body to allow us to be safe and to get us out of danger. But whenever that becomes no longer a mechanism problem, that's when anxiety starts to kick in, and it actually becomes a perception of danger problem. So as you can see, like, their danger presents itself, we're able to get out of danger and come back into it. But if we start to take everything almost as a threat, that's when anxiety can become a major, major issue. And like I say, with the state of protection and like the fight or flight response, which I have mentioned a couple times here now, it is a safety mechanism and it is a protection mechanism. But it also then, whenever it comes on at the wrong time, or it almost like triggers too soon or triggers too often, that's when anxiety can just start to really reside within the body, and the nervous system is the one that's having to kind of hold on to that and deal with it. And that can be a lot to take on if we don't start to throw like a wrench within that system. So whenever I talk to my clients about anxiety, and we talk a lot about stress in my office and how stress is pretty much the primary cause of most of the modern health problems within our society, the stress just gets stuck on. That's what I want you to remember from that. So if you notice that your kiddo is just going through a lot of stress, unable to adapt to stress, keeps building, and they're not, you just kind of tell that like they're just kind of not, like I say, yeah, the best word to use is adapting to that stress. That's whenever we can start to see this anxiety, and then later on some depression start to rear its ugly head. We'll be talking about those stressors here just in a little bit. We're gonna kind of keep going on with like how anxiety presents in teens, as well as just kind of like kiddos as well. When stressed out completely, you know, and let's go into it. What are kids stressed about? What is causing all of these stressors within these teens? They're not having to worry about mortgage. They're not having to worry about, you know, putting food on the table or like a deadline at work or anything like that. They are having to go to school, they're having to participate in their activities, and they're having to, you know, be with their friends. How can it be all that bad? We're gonna go ahead and talk about those stresses and what those, you know, how they start to filter in. So with stress, we're gonna have some physical stressors. We're gonna go through physical stressors, chemical stressors, and emotional stressors. So with physical stressors, posture. What kind of teenager likes to stand up nice and tall? Not very many of them that I see in my office or walking around. So we might get like that text neck where we're always looking down. Growth spurts, that is where they're gonna happen. They're gonna come on fierce. They're gonna do their thing. But with growth spurts, we're also gonna have some lower amount of core strength. And so that's where that poor posture can kind of start to come in as well. With girls, we start to see obviously development within the chest and stuff like that. And so like if that's something that they're not quite comfortable with yet, they're gonna wanna roll their shoulders forward and kind of just hunch over and kind of wanna just almost hide from the world. So those are gonna be some stressors, like their physical stress on the body. They're not ones that, you know, the body's gonna be able to say like, oh, that's perfectly fine, that's okay. Because we all know how like poor posture can lead on to things later on in life. Computer and screen time, that can be some physical stressors just because it's so much to take in. Their vision's having to take in stuff, their hearing's having to take in stuff. And like if that's just out, has as much as it is for teens these days and how much they are on their computers and screen time, it's just a lot of system overload within their sensory process. Hours upon hours of homework. This can be a lot, you know, in different positions that they're laying in as they're doing their homework, and lack of activity. So with anxiety, we will be talking about like so much, like these people are like a bunch of people, that kiddos or teens, I should say, that develop the anxiety. They're so high energy and go, and involved maybe in a lot and way too many things. But then again, you might start to see like the lack of energy that actually becomes a physical stress, because some of these kids with the depression aren't moving their body as much. And video games, that's just another one. I think that can be self-explanatory there. Chemical stressors we're gonna talk about. So with chemical stressors, what teen likes to eat a nice, healthy, rounded diet? Not very many. So we're gonna be talking a lot about junk food. Our body has to then take in all of that processed food that these kids are eating, a lot of the sugar, a lot of the pop, a lot of the, you know, carbs, high carbs. They're not reaching for an apple a lot of the time. So this is something that we might want to start to bring to light with our teens. And then it just kind of instills healthy habits within them as adults. If we are starting to show them like better nutritional choices, their body will actually know how to take that in, absorb it, break it down. And then that way, if you do take on like some of those other chemical stressors of, you know, poor food choices, our body actually has to release different hormones and whatnot to break that down. And so some of those hormones might be like a stress hormones, like sugars and stuff like that. Honestly, like excite the body and elicit almost a slight stress response within our body that has to pump out different hormones that our body doesn't necessarily want to do. But that's just what it has to do in order to digest that food. We talked about sugar. Drinking, unfortunately, we're talking about teens. I know a lot of us think teenagers and we think, oh, 13, 14, 15. No, we're getting up into that 16, 17, and 18-year-olds as well. They might turn to drinking to cope with some of their ways of coping with anxiety or depression. And it also can become obviously a form of peer pressure as well. So we want to be aware of that stuff. Toxic makeup and soaps. I know you're probably thinking, okay, crunchy granola lady, wrap it up. But there's so many things within our soaps and makeup, like for our teen girls, that can throw off like our hormonal imbalance as well. And so like a lot of times like anxiety and depression can there can be like a chemical imbalance, so-called. So like we want to bring those chemicals that we can have control of and keep them off of our body, off of our skin, you know, not, you know, soaking into our skin, which is our largest organ, and takes on a whole, you know, it's a great protective barrier, but it also soaks in all the things that we lather on it every day. Emotional stressors. This is probably the most impactful whenever we're talking about anxiety and depression. Obviously, we're talking about emotions and the mind. Peer pressure. Hardest time for this. I think it's honestly getting younger and younger. I think we're seeing this a lot into our even young kiddos. Even my little niece, who's 6 years old, was dealing with, you know, peer pressure and bullying. I guess it's bullying, I should say. But we'll, you know, get to the bullying there. But peer pressure, there's so much that they feel like they have to fit in and try hard, and that becomes a huge stress. And I think it's so much harder now than it even was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. There's just so much pressure to fit in, to be liked, and to do all the things that, like, we're having to try to keep up within our society. Bullying that I just kind of talked about. We can go on, you know, on the coattails of that with social media standards. Thank God social media wasn't around when I was a kid. I don't know how these kiddos are dealing with it, and maybe as parents we need to kind of monitor it a little bit more on how much they are exposed to it, even maybe decreasing it, because the social media standards that are out there now for teens, having that, you know, like they say, oh, what filter do you use? Well, a lot of the social media, they're filtering their own life. They're trying to show that they, you know, have the best, have this, have that, everything's wonderful. And so whenever teens see this, and with teens we don't have like a fully developed brain yet anyway, on making rash decisions or able to decipher completely what is true and what is not true. And so that is all that social media is. How much can I fabricate my life? And then when others see that and they feel like they can't have those, or they can't live up to those standards, that causes a lot of depression within them, even the anxiety, and that's just super hard on kiddos' mental status and their emotions. So a lot going on there. Another emotional stressor is going to be your relationships and your friendships. As we transition from like our little kiddo years into the teen years, we might develop different than some of our friends, and then that might put us in different groups, you know, of new friends. And so those people that were maybe left out or left, you know, behind are suffering with that. We start to, you know, show interest more into the opposite sex, or, you know, girlfriends, boyfriends, stuff like that. And so there's those relationships, you know, stressors that kids are going through as well. Another emotional stressor is going to be time management skills. What teen knows how to time manage? Said any parent ever, always, whatever I want to say there. If you have a teen at home now, or you've had one in the past, or you're coming up with one, you will notice that their time management skills can be very, very poor. Like, you got home from school and you've had all this time, and now it's 9 o'clock and nothing's done. What have you been doing? Well, I've been doing this. And then they get spouting off back at you. But yes, time management skills are probably not going to be number one with kids. But once again, if we don't have those time management skills, it's going to cause a lot of stress. It's going to cause anxiety because they didn't get that done, you know. And so it's just going to cause more of that overwhelm within the system that we're trying to avoid. So there's the time management. Testing, you know, as we get into the junior, senior years and college prep years, it becomes another stress as well. An emotional stress of, you know, getting the grades that we want to get into so we can get into that college. You know, doing all the college visits and actually deciding what school to do. It's a lot of stress. It's like, you know, and at a time being a teen, every decision that you make is almost life or death. We've all been there like, oh my God. And now we look back and it's like, okay, that wasn't that big of a deal. But, you know, picking the right college it is a big deal. And you know what career path you want to go down. You need to pick the right school that's good for you. Decision consequences. This one is kind of, they've made a decision and it might have been not the right one, and now they're having to deal with the consequences of it. That's not a thing that a teen likes to do. I think they all like to think, you know, I know everything, I got this figured out. Mom and Dad, you don't know anything. Well, let me tell you something else. But dealing with those consequences is something that, you know, they're having to deal with as another stress. And then once again, tying that all together, the schoolwork, the social life balance. There's a lot going on there, and fitting on, you know, on the social media, fitting in person. Another stress that I think, honestly, with that being said, is kids are getting further, or like they're getting closer to wanting to fit in virtually, but then they're having those issues whenever it comes personally. And personal relationships is what our human body and human nature is what we flourish off of. So almost going against nature is what we're doing, like with the social media and virtual friends and all of this stuff in the video games. It's kind of against like what our body was made to be. And so they're constantly adapting and fighting that almost. And so whenever it comes time to have like the friendships within, you know, person to person, that can kind of be very stressful and overwhelming for them as well. So going over those stressors is one of the things I want to obviously touch on. So now we can kind of go into, you know, the anxiety that we've talked about and how they are whenever they're stressed. And these are kind of the presentations that anxiety presents with. With teen anxiety, we're going to present whenever they're stressed, they're going to start to show some avoidance and like shut down. That's that fight or flight response kicking in and saying, hey, like there's becoming so much going on. The fight or flight's kicking in, and all I want to do to get away from it, the only thing I know how to do, and this is like ingrained within them, I'm going to shut down and I'm going to avoid. If I do that, maybe the problem will go away. Usually it does not. Also presentations within these kiddos that suffer with anxiety, not kiddos, teens, I need to keep saying that, is that they're going to be a lot of your high energy overachiever kids. They're going to be go, go, go. They're going to want to get the best grades. They're going to be the best on the team. They're want to, you know, like being a high achiever is okay in a healthy range, but also allowing that anxiety not to get so built up within them that they're feeling like they, you know, might not be able to keep up with it. We start to see some, like with these high achievers, some substance abuse. Because they have to keep going. They have to keep performing at that level. They have to keep at that high energy, high level, high performing, you know, level, as I've said. They also might to show then eventually that they get exhausted all the time. So we're just talking about like, so they're high energy, but now they're exhausted all the time. They get a lot of sleepiness, a lot of sickness because their immune system has might have just kind of kicked the can. They don't want, you know, the immune system is overworked and overstressed and overtaxed with so much stress. And that's when they start to get sick a lot more because your immune system is starting to kind of not break down, but not function as it should. And we've all been there. Like if you could remember back, like when you're in college and you had a, you know, finals week, and I can say this, every finals week, I would get strep throat. Like every time, or just come down with something, is because I was not adapting to the stress that I was under, and I was pushing through and I was going, and bam, the second it was over, the second the stress was gone, my immune system just crashed and tanked, and I was sick for a good 2, 3, 4 days. Another thing that we'll start to see, and like moving on, another thing we'll start to see with anxiety is like these kids are not going to want to open up. They're going to remain kind of closed off. They don't want to talk about things. They will internalize a lot of things. And once again, with mental health, the second we start to internalize everything and start just taking, and I just tell people almost like the stress is just a dose of medicine, but not medicine, poison, I should say. Stress is a dose of poison, and each time they internalize things and they're not opening up, that resides within them. And our nervous system is the only thing that knows how to adapt with that. And if our nerves get overstressed and overtaxed, it just becomes kind of a little storm within their bodies, and that anxiety is going to start to show ways once it's internalized. The way that it gets out of the body, out of our body as teenagers, is we're going to start to have those blow-ups. We're going to have to start to have like exploding emotional like freakouts. And we've seen it with teens. They are going right along perfectly fine, and then all of a sudden, bam, here it comes, and it just starts coming out of them, and these horrible, like, you know, teenage tantrums almost, and these emotional blowouts. They're gonna have a lot of, with anxiety, they'll kind of, once again, they're kind of wrestling with that constantly within their body. They're gonna have a lot of emotional unpredictability. You know, you've done one thing with them one night and it's like sweet, or one weekend and you're like, awesome, we're gonna do it again, and that weekend they hate it. Or that weekend they lash out, when literally 2 days ago or a week before they loved it. That's some other ways that anxiety presents itself in these teens. And another one that's kind of really near and dear to my heart, and this is going to be shown in like depression and anxiety, is low self-esteem and low confidence. And you're sitting there thinking, well, I thought we just talked about like this was our high energy, high achiever kid. Yes, it is. But whenever they feel like they have to go so far over the top, they might be actually showing or hiding like their lack of self-esteem and their low confidence. And as teenage girls, this is one thing, and I shouldn't discount the boys, but with teenage girls, this is one thing that I would never wish upon any of them, because the second we have low self-esteem and low confidence, we sometimes allow other people to make the decision for us. And as young teens, like, we want them to be empowered. We want them to feel like they're strong and they can make their own decisions without having that lack of self-esteem or that lack of confidence to be pushed over or to do things that they don't want to do that maybe impacts their life later on. So like having that low self-esteem and low confidence is just a big eye-opener that we need to pay attention to, and to start turning it. And like I say, I'm going to share with you, you know, how we can throw a wrench into that system and help these kiddos. You'll also see negative self-talk with these kids with anxiety. And once again, we're thinking, gosh, the high performers, no. But like, they will talk like they never did it good enough, even though they did it perfect. You know, or they got a 99 and it wasn't 100. So they're going to, you know, be down on themselves and beat themselves down pretty good. So those are some of the things with anxiety. Moving on with teen depression and what depression is characterized. Depression is characterized by persistently depressed mood or loss of interest in activities. And just like a lot of, what's that word? Like just a lot of impairment within their activities as well. And this will then cause an impairment within their daily lives. We will see this set in later. Anxiety will usually show like in our younger teens, but why depression sets in later is because these high stress, you know, whenever they're so high stress for so long, and we talked about how anxiety can just be stress, 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 kicked on, kicked on, kicked on, stress stuck on is what we talked about. They have that threshold of stress and they have that threshold of anxiety. And if that keeps building and building, 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 and with their high energy, high energy, high energy, they can no longer maintain that high energy and that, you know, overachiever status. They can't maintain that anymore. And so with that high energy, you're eventually going to see that low come crashing in. And so like I say, the young teen years, you're going to see that. And then the second that they can no longer withhold that amount of, you know, go, 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 high energy, they're going to crash and go into one of those lows. Like I say, cannot stay in that for that long. It's going to be coming in around that 16, 17-year-old range. And so depression always kind of, you know, follows anxiety with this, because anxiety might not be recognized. We might not see it, you know, as soon or in those years that it's actually forming. And then once it becomes formed and actually then turns into depression, that's when we start to see it. So this issue's been happening for quite a while, and then all of a sudden, bam, their system almost breaks down and they become into that depressed mood. So just kind of be on the lookout for that. Ways in which teen depression presents itself is withdrawn completely. They don't like to do much. They just kind of like to do their own thing by themselves, might be in their room with the door shut a lot. They're tired and fatigued because they've been high energy for so long. Their body just can't keep up with it. And now like their new norm for them is just so tired and so fatigued. Really be on the look for that. They're also probably not going to be sleeping real well. Now you're thinking, oh, this is going to be a lot of teens, you know, and it can be, you know, they're dinking around. And I have many patients right now that they come in and like, yeah, we're up till 4 a.m. And I'm like, and they're 17. I'm like, what are you doing? But they're playing video games. But there might be some other kiddos that they weren't playing video games and they were just up and they're wanting to sleep a lot. But I wear like, yeah, teens sleep a lot. Yes, they do. But this is why we're going to be kind of more aware of some of these other situations here. And with the sleep, they might be sleeping in past their alarms, or they have that major lack of motivation. And so whenever they're sleeping past their alarms, they're going to be late for school, they're going to be late for work. That's some other ways in which like depression is going to start to show up. Give me one moment here. I need to pause this. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. My battery likes to be ridiculous. And then they're also going to be showing lack of participation almost in everything. Anything that it involves. With school, you know, maybe they're hugely involved like with sports before and now they don't care. They don't care to be with friends. They don't care to do even their gaming online or anything like that. Anything that it has to do with the family, pets, Maybe they're huge, like into your family dog for a while. Now they could care less. There's where some depression might be residing. Once again, low confidence, like we talked with anxiety, as well as lack of self-worth. And this is something that, like, as teens, we need to help them get past this, so then they can be, you know, those adults that they wish and that they hope they can be. Another one too is lack of coping mechanisms. And within that factor, you know, many times, and I hate that I even have to bring up this word right now, but we get into suicidal thoughts and attempts. That's when, you know, things have gotten really, really bad. And this is where I want to, with this webinar, is bring light to the things of anxiety and what to be looking for, and the depression as well, so we can kind of step in. I know that teens can be moody. I know teens can have their emotional outbreaks. I know that teens can sleep in a lot. But just as parents, and we don't want to be like helicopter parents, I get it. But for the betterment of our children, in the betterment of their lives, and then therefore their lives and our community, we need to kind of just be in tune with these things and just start to look for these changes, and, you know, reach out to a mental health therapist, reach out to me. We can do any kind of, you know, just have them come in for an exam, and I can, you know, I can see what I can pick up on, see what a mental health therapist can pick up on. Don't go this alone. Reach out for the help that you need. And it can be tricky and hard with teens, but like, we can get there, we can do it together. So those are the ways that, like, the teen anxiety and depression kind of show itself. We're going to be moving on now to, like, how do they get there? What happens? And so we're going to be talking about a mental health mind shift. So from whenever it is a child to a teen to an adult, what we're going to see. And so with a child that might eventually, you know, that'll develop into teen anxiety or adult anxiety and depression, they're going to be high stress. Children are high stress. Yes, they can be go, 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 high energy, high pace, but they also have no coping mechanisms, and they have no awareness of their stress. So with talking about this, we want to bring awareness. We want to empower these kids. They need to be, you know, they're old enough to be a part of their health journey and healing mechanism and their healing plan in their life. And so, but as kids, they might not have, they don't have any of that awareness to stress. So it's almost like you're just running with no abandonment. Like, they're just going, like, running into walls. Like, usually as teens, we know, like, if I run into that wall, it's probably not going to hurt. Definitely as adults we do. But young kids, they just go, go, go with no real sense of stress. And they're just doing their thing. As teens, we're still going to be presenting as high stress. But awareness of we might start to become a little bit more aware of our stress, but we also have immature coping mechanisms or unhealthy habits. With that, we might still continue, like, I'm kind of aware that I have the stress, but I'm not really for sure on how to cope with it. And so therefore, I'm going to lash out. I'm going to have emotional outbursts. I'm then going to maybe withdraw because I don't know how else to react. My fight or flight response is causing me just to withdraw, and I'm going to develop low, you know, confidence because I'm not for sure how I should be handling myself. And it's like they're coping, or, you know, turning to drugs and alcohol. My coping mechanisms as a teen are just not there. And so, like, that's where we kind of come in and help them with that, and help them with their nervous system so it can function the best that it can. But then as adults, we then have high stress. We're still going to have high stress as adults, but we're going to have awareness of our stress. And this is where the beauty of, like, seeing how chiropractic care can come into these kiddos' lives and impact them in this way. So with the awareness of stress, and as an adult, we do then have mature coping mechanisms, but unhealthy habits are accepted by, you know, now accepted by by society. And what I mean by that is, you know, now it's okay to go out with your friends and have a couple cocktails and drink without the, you know, the punishment, you know, maybe getting an MIP as a young teenager, or getting, I mean, but you're still probably in trouble getting caught with drugs as an adult too. But as an adult, what I was saying before, we are able then to, you know, come on to our, you know, accept our stress and maybe acknowledge it a little bit more. But if we don't, we're going to go ahead and continue to develop on into that horrible anxiety, horrible depression. And that's just going to become a storm within our body as well if we're unable to adapt to stress. And so what we want to talk about now is just how to break that cycle. How in the world do we get in there? Mental health therapy. Absolutely. Do we all need a mental health therapist? I think, like I say, every single person should, just because talking about things getting it out there, making it more aware even to our mind and our subconscious, because the times that we start to talk about things and bring them out into the open, our body starts to say, okay, I'm not internalizing that anymore. It doesn't necessarily feel like a stress to me anymore because now I've talked about it and somebody else knows. Like, to hold on to a secret is very, very hard. That's why kids are horrible at it. But as an adult, it's hard to hold on to that own secret ourselves and internalize it and let it fester within us. How many of us have maybe had a situation like that, and how did that turn out? It turned out to a huge amount of stress, a huge amount of anxiety, and therefore even depression, because then you almost feel like you're trapped. That's what these kids are going through with their stresses. Once again, their stress is completely different than ours right now, and that's okay. Their brains haven't even fully developed yet, and so therefore they're going to take on to stress completely different than ours. Their threshold to stress is much lower than ours because they don't have the experience. They don't have the coping mechanisms. They might be able to feel the stress coming on, but they don't know how to adapt it and divert it into a different way. As adults, we do have that. Some of us do, I guess some of us don't. But as kids, that's why this anxiety and depression starts to come in, is because they still, like, their brains are still developing and they still don't know, you know, what's right, how should I handle this, what's going on. And if they keep it inside of themselves, they're just going to keep internalizing, and it's going to start to fester, and that nervous system of theirs is just going to become so stressed, so tensed, so overwhelmed, and their nerves are going to literally feel like they're shot, because they are. And so as chiropractors, that's where we come in and we put a slash into that. Chiropractic breaks the cycle. Chiropractic helps lower stress and their system get out of that stress mode. And you're like, well, how do you do that? So within our nervous system, we have two parts of it. We have a parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest, digest, heal, grow, relax, all of that. So there's the parasympathetic side. And then there's also the sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight response or our stress response. And so each time that our body takes on a stress, it can either know how to adapt to it and go from that fight or flight response and adapt back into the rest and digest response, or we get way more locked into that stress stuck on, like I have mentioned before. And when stress is stuck on, our nervous system just keeps going. It keeps pumping out all the stress hormones. Our body keeps doing like this it's almost like your trigger gets tripped quicker and quicker and quicker, the less you are able to adapt to stress, and the less you let that sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight again, stay stuck on. Chiropractic, we're able to find within your spine and within your body, within your nervous system, your parasympathetic nervous system, and see and get it oomphed back on. So with our parasympathetic and our sympathetic, only one can be on at one time. You can't have both on at the same time. So with our fight or flight, like I say, a vital part of our survival, a vital part of our body and how it helps us survive and be a part of our survival mechanism, because we've all been in a stress situation or gotten in a car wreck or gotten in a car accident or diverting from a car accident. Your stress response gets kicked on. We all know what that feels like. But if we were to stay in that heightened sense of stress, can you imagine how you'd feel? This is how some of these kids feel. Their stress is stuck on. They feel like they're almost in the constant threat, the constant flight, the constant, oh, I gotta fight myself through this. They're stuck into that. And so for us as chiropractors, we can go in and find that parasympathetic part of the nervous system, help kick it on so it kicks off the fight or flight. So then in the parasympathetic mode, these young kids and these teens are actually able then to rest. Their body's able to rest, digest, heal, relax, not have the mental emotional outbreaks, not have like the outburst. They're going to want to feel like they're able to, like I say, adapt to their stresses, so then they don't want to withdraw. They don't want to miss out on practice. They don't want to be late for school. They want to have a healthy relationship with their friends. They want to know whenever they look at their social media that they are gosh dang good enough. And that their stress, then they're still going to have it. Yes, we can't avoid it. But then they're able to feel what it's like whenever a stress comes on and how to bring themselves back down and how to adapt. Their nervous system's going to be like, hey, we got this. Like I said, with that, it increases self-awareness to recognize and eliminate those stressors, which is what we want for these kids. And then that way with the adaptation, it's going to improve those coping mechanisms in order to adapt to stress more efficiently and effectively. How awesome is that for these kids? And so if we can do this as in their teenage years, imagine how they're going to be able to handle life stressors as an adult. And so then it doesn't start, their anxiety and depression doesn't start in their teenage years. And so by the time they're in their mid-20s, mid-30s, even 50s, 40s, 50s, everything, that they aren't having to deal with and fight all these things that maybe could have been taken care of in their teenage years. I want to be so much about prevention for these kids that they can have the teenage years that they deserve, because it's hard enough being a teenager and your body going through all sorts of changes, to not allow them to be able to adapt to those stressors and to be able to have the best like teenage years that they can. And like, it's high school, it's like some of the best years of your life, and so they don't need to suffer with that. And so allowing chiropractic, and what we do as chiropractors is we work with their nervous system. We get to the root cause, and we are able to see how much they are with the scan. We have scanning equipment in my office. We're able to see where they are in that stress mode. Are they more in stress, fight or flight, or are they more in that parasympathetic rest, digest, heal, relax mode? We're able to pick up on that, and that's pretty cool. And I think that's amazing technology that's come a long way. So we're able to pick up on that in their early years, and we're then able to find parts of their, nervous system that is more of that stress is stuck on. We're able to find it and help release that stress off of that area, so their body can able to relax and just kind of bring them back down, so they don't feel in that go of those anxiety years and those high energy, high overachiever, exhausted all the time because they're going so much, and then their body eventually collapses down and goes into that depressed mode. I don't want that for any kid. And so if we can help these kids with this, it's not only going to make their lives more wonderful and fantastic, it's going to do your family well. It's going to do you good, mom and dad. It's just going to do, and even then, like, they're on their community and their life from there on after. If any of this has sounded like your team, please reach out to me. I want to help you. I want to help them to live the life that they deserve. You can reach me at 402-432-7702 or sjlwellness@gmail.com. And let's get these kiddos helped. Let's get them booming and flourishing. And like I say, I'm here for you. Thank you for listening, and I appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.